So yeah, there's Chucky the Clown running his mouth, and so far right conspiratorial writer, and that's how they do it, isn't it? That's what they do to all of us every single time it's anything they don't agree with. These far left whack jobs that are controlled by Marxist ideology. Anyone who they don't agree with is a far right conspiratorial writer or activist or domestic terrorist, as I have and others have been labeled. It's pretty ridiculous. Grant Torino, what's your thoughts on? I mean, the same thing happens to you guys over there. Am I wrong?
Yeah, in different ways. Live chat, how are you? I've literally literally is a word that's very much overused, but I've just this second got the live chat up to you, and I can see all your comments, your lovely warm well wishes. I thank you very much for that. And just to catch up with you and the audience, then to see who is who, 5 by 5. Then where am I going to go here? I've got to jump back into American politics. My head has been in Irish social media, culture war, starting the next campaign for the next part of the political war. But we must focus on due to our results back here, we must focus on the culture war here and engage in the culture war, because the political war, as you can tell by the results, we don't have a sitting parliament just yet. There's no formed government. So the three main parties as it stands are Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, and Sinn Féin. And I'm going to say to you in the live chat, and say to you as well, Conscious, that I'm going to be conscious with my words. I am slowing my speech down because I'm very aware I'm speaking to an American audience. And sometimes I might sound British, but I don't sound the British like Daddy Dragon does, right? You know what I mean? You've got to do what you've got to do, innit? Anyway, we can go there if you want.
Well, let me show you the headlines that I found with regards to your election that was this past weekend, right? Just a few days ago. And there's 3 different headlines. I found a Sputnik that said elections in Ireland spell, and let me know which one of these is the best breakdown, or if none of these are, give me your summary. Elections in Ireland spell breakdown of a traditional 2-style system, and it has Sinn Féin, I think is how you pronounce it, but it talks about how basically they surprised, as in for the disenfranchised, so to speak. And then we have Reuters, bruised Irish rivals allow Sinn Féin to government initiative, and make it seem like they are a left-wing nationalist party, which is interesting how they label them on Reuters. And then,
where have you heard that term before? What left-wing socialist party does that spring to mind?
I'm going to go with Hitler and his nationalist party, the original Fabian.
Well, like I said to you earlier on, and I'm just going to clarify before we crack on, I am going to be particularly guarded in what I say here tonight, because one of the main reasons that I drifted away from Patriot Soapbox, and I know we're all very much aware of the guys back over there, and I also set the bar straight there that I haven't been incommunicado or anything like that. But what I will say is the guys over there were very good to me at a time when I was in great need. So I will keep my opinion on my situation. I'm not abreast of everything, so I want to set that out from the start. Pamphlet and Radix have been good to me, and I don't know the true ins and outs of everything, but that's not somewhere I want to go tonight. Just to clarify, if you would.
No, I mean, yes, you've been through hell and back, and the community, we all were trying to help you through a time when they were doing everything they can to silence you, and I don't think that's if anything, that's probably gotten worse since the time of those days. Am I wrong on that front?
Yeah, well, if you can place yourselves in the role of Tommy in the early days, and he had a much bigger apparatus that was coming after him, but similar to what I had over here. What we do have on an ongoing basis is NGOs and those that work within the NGOs that feed information down to other organizations, be they sectarian or terrorist, in their design, in their ideology. And what I wanted to reiterate to the live chat and your audience as well, that Ireland's a very small place. There's not a lot of places you can go in Ireland and not be known or seen or to be in there. If you put Ireland on a scale of, I think it's comparable to New York in its entirety, just off the top of my head, but obviously not with the huge infrastructure, but more of a rural plane. If you're following Instagram, I post in there different aspects. You get the general picture of what Ireland is like. But we are in very tempestuous times. We have had a political revolution over here, but it hasn't been a right wing or a conservative or a centre right. It's been drifting along now as a liberal progressive sort of democracy. But now we are, how shall I say, facing a possible future with a possible previous sectarian organisation that could actually get into the realms of controls of power and gain inside information that they previously wouldn't have been allowed access to, because they will have positions at the seat of power in the situation of government. Interesting dichotomy just to get started with, and maybe to throw it into your thing. The Garda Commissioner here, which is the head of the police force here in Ireland, is Drew Harris. He comes from a previous constabulary up in the north, which is separated by the partition. We can get into that later on as it goes. But his father was also a police commissioner up the north, and his father was killed by the IRA during the Troubles. So it will also be an interesting dynamic to see how the Sinn Féin, which was the political arm of the sectarian of the Irish Republican Army at the time, as it stood previously to the 80s, previously to 1969, when it was a true Republican organisation, but it is now cultural Marxist. It is anti-Irish in its policies now. It is so far left-leaning, it's democratic left-leaning, and it's not even the Nancy Pelosi or the Schumacher left-leaning. We're talking AOC. We're talking subversives that are controlled not only by corporations, obviously, but by nefarious actions that are very much involved in your politics over here. So I will allude, I won't identify, because I'm being cautious with my words, because as I say, I'm in a small container. I have to be very careful till my situation improves, or maybe the appetite for discourse and discussion without violence, shall we say.
It's an amazing time to be alive. And back in the day when we would originally talk about these topics, Graham was shocked to learn that their conservative party is our traditional liberal. They're big government. They count on the government to solve problems. They aren't necessarily interested in decentralized control. They aren't interested in getting budgets under control. They look to the government for solutions, when actuality, we all know that the government just creates problems. They don't necessarily try to solve problems. They create problems to solve so that you can look to them to become dependent upon them and then continue to vote for them. That same strategy plays out worldwide, Gran Torino. And so when Graham and I talked about this, over a year ago, 2 years ago, however long ago it's been, probably a year and a half ago, explaining to him that his conservative party is our center-left party. How does that play in Ireland? First of all, I didn't realize that Northern Ireland was under British rule. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. Well, look, I'm not going to tease you about that. I mean, everybody has their own understanding, but essentially the 6 counties of the northern part of Ireland, way back in the day, became after the 1916 Rising and after petition and after agreement through the Civil War, not specific dates, but Northern Ireland was partitioned and remained part of the United Kingdom, and it came under its jurisdiction. So its tax, its currency, it has a sitting parliament, much like Scotland and Wales would have a parliament. Scotland is more independent than it is. Wales is more compliant with the main parliament down in London. But in Ireland, in the northern part of Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom, it has Stormont, which is its parliament buildings, where it controls its budgetary concerns, its infrastructure on behalf of the United Kingdom. So 26 other counties, which is the remaining of the same part of the landmass of Ireland, is under the control of the Republic of Ireland. The Republic of Ireland has always been, as I've grown up and come to my understanding, from an early age, not from an early age, but I never paid much attention to it because I was working from an early age. So I was involved in, I was working on a ferry. I was conducting I got my seaman certificate as an ordinary deckhand, and that was my life. But I was at that from 14, 15, 16. But even then, unbeknownst to myself, We were very much under the control of the union, a trade union, the Seamen's Union of Ireland. And to give you some sort of thing, we would have strike actions. These strike actions would cost the company money. But the how shall I say, the union, the Seamen's Union of Ireland, sorry, they would be stood at the ship every week when we were boarding the ship, and you have to get your book stamped to make sure that you paid your membership fees before you were allowed to work. So not only were you getting it there from the union for your drafts, but then when you were doing your work, I was doing 4 hours on, 4 hours off on a 48-hour rotation at sometimes during the passenger car ferries. For me, that was exhausting. That was just crazy times. I can't believe I got through that. Like, you were working for 4 hours and you had 4 hours off, then you were back on for them 4 hours, and you were and so your clock. And we were running between the United Kingdom, Rosslare, and Dublin. So they were crazy times. So over that period of time, of the next year or two, more and more strike action was called by the unions, till eventually businesses decided to bring in other crews. So when the company started to failing because it couldn't maintain its services, its schedule, it broke down, and much to the point that competition came in. But a competition came in with a crew of Polish and crew of Greek, and they rotated every 6 months. And the ship was hired from Onassis out of Greece. And the Greek crew, or the crews, were manned and paid for by Onassis. But there was a small limited Irish crew which would, perform bar duties or onboard management positions. But none of the crew that operated the steering of the vessel or the watches, they were all manned by the Greek crew. So that's when that came in. And at that time, the Greeks were paid in their own currency, and the Polish were paid in their own currency as zlotys. And there was big uptake about it at the time, because I think the zloty at the time was not even a third the value of the Irish punt that the Irish workforce were getting paid in. So there we had the early start of the European, the EEC, 1973, the movement of trade. So at the time, the government capitulated because the unions were kicking up about this year. It's costing Irish jobs, they're undercutting us. But businesses got businesses' way, deals were made, envelopes were passed, and that became the norm then. Fast forward 20 years later, now we're on 0 hours contracts. The unions have disappeared. That was their leftist ideology. They were Marxists, I'm thinking, or Leninists, some form of, well, if they followed the example of Sinn Féin based themselves on Cuban revolutionaries. They've always seen themselves as revolutionaries, hence why they had to struggle up the north, fighting the empire, fighting the power, doing its thing to free that section of Ireland, which was still left under the control of the Crown. That caused great destruction. It was called the original plantation. It started back with Oliver Cromwell, when he brought over, and the Crown decided to plant in Protestant landlords who owned great swaths of land around Ireland. And because of that, this divide between two peoples, majority at the time were English in origin, still Saxons, but came with the Protestant values. And their farms, their tenants were Catholics, young Catholics. And if you understand that history, I don't want to go backwards and forwards in time, but 400 years later, that pittance against those two cultures are still very much in our Ireland after 400 years. So now we have Sinn Féin, which is now ascribing to the cultural Marxists of open borders, pro-abortion, sexual education in line with the transgenderism, the LGBTQ, which is being pushed out throughout the world. That is, as we know and come to understand, that is from the corporations, from wherever we want to go and expand that in the Q realm, in the conspiratorial region, as we all are, but to appease to the masses, to appease to the general public over here, still laying breadcrumbs. So I'm just trying to give you a background to Sinn Féin's direction. The Clintons became involved in the Northern Ireland Peace Agreement in and around the time of the 80s, and the Troubles were still maintaining. The Troubles were still very much, there was bombs, there was bullets, there was executions, there was all sorts of stuff still going on. Sectarian violence, pretty much as Syria experienced. But it's through the Clintons' involvement, which was seen throughout the world as a wonderful deed. John Hume was lauded and got the Nobel Peace Prize. But all these people and all these actors are somewhere along the line are tied together through Masonry, through the Masonic organizations. And Northern Ireland is, because of its heritage with the United Kingdom, has so many Mason lodges scattered throughout the Northern Ireland. It's ridiculous. So there is a whole culture that no matter what level of understanding you are in the Mason thing, some Masons see themselves as a network of businesses. They comply, they work, and they maintain that community together. You know, if we talk about 33rd, who knows? That doesn't register with most people on the ground.
Yeah,
they just see Masonry as a business network, and that's fine with me, you know. So here we have Sinn Féin espousing now anti-Irish policy. So how they can still laud themselves as nationalists, because the nationalist wants to maintain borders, wants to maintain internal security, wants to enrich its citizens first and see its citizens cared and nurtured for, because that is the citizens' land. But when this new ideology, which has been raging through our academia since the Clintons, where I think part of the peace agreement, were able to bring over 17 professors from University College Buffalo. And these professors then brought out and rolled out to us the cultural Marxism, the Frankfurt School, or whatever iteration, the Saul Alinsky version of it. And it has proliferated now to the sense where the open borders, LGBT, everybody is equal, is pretty much akin to fucking Sweden. Sorry for cursing. But it is at that level. Now I see today, and I'm sure you guys will be aware, and I'm sorry to hog the mic, I don't know if you've seen the Scandinavian Air ad that was put out on YouTube. Scandinavian Air Service, pretty much like what they did with the Gillette ad. You know what I mean? They went full woke. They've done the exact same thing with the Swedish airline. And what does it mean to be Swedish? Nothing. Everybody can be Swedish. So we have people of colour, people of all different races, but it's the demigration of the ideal of the Swedish people, which is European in origin, which is blonde hair, blue-eyed, pale skin. But now that's all being conflated and blended up, because the mostly female politicians and the mostly liberal version of socialism that was is bankrupt. Sweden is bankrupt. Sweden is lost. But there are many great patriots in Sweden starting to cop on, and they're making their way into the political sphere. I think it's called the Swedish Democratic Party. It might be the Democratic Party, but Swedish nationalists are having a presence in the political world in Sweden. So you can imagine they have had a huge transition in security and safety over the last 5 to 10 years because of Angela Merkel's open border policy, which now, if you watch my last interview with Simon Roach from Suderlanders.org, he nailed it really down well. But sorry, I lost my train of thought where I was heading there. But the open borders, the Sinn Féin, so the reinforcement and the Clinton involvement, I think there was dirty money passed around through the Northern Ireland peace agreement with the Clintons. There was 300 million pumped into the 6 counties of the Northern Ireland branch. Where that money went, nobody knows. How that got distributed is not really accounted for. The masses of the people won't know. But needless to say, the actors that were part of the Republic of Ireland that were representing the government at the time, they're all very much well catered for now in their pensionable positions or their retired positions. None of them face prosecution, even though one of them, Bertie Ahern, through all his trials and tribulations as a finance minister, said he never owned a bank account. The Irish public accepted that as normal. He was having personal problems because he was separated from his wife and the mother of his children, and he was involved in a very public relationship. Who was, in fact, his what would you call it? His PR person at the time. She became his PR. But to say that the Minister of Finance, who was in a public position, never had a bank account, and that friends and family loaned him money, and that's how he was able to account for his cash, stuff like that. This all gets lost in the melee of tribunals over here. We have no first principle agreements of the equality of the rule of law. You know, so we have rank corruption within our government institutions. Our permanent government is pretty much akin to your deep state, but we call them permanent government. The mandarins that are permanently there, that are probably owned in some kind of Epstein-like situation, who knows? That stuff is very much prevalent over here. And again, I'm dancing with my words. I'm not painting pictures, but to understand the Clintons, to understand their people, that's here as well. That's happening, but I can only allude to it at the moment.
No, I understand.
Sorry, Carl, just one final point. Because we don't have the equality of the rule of law. Our judiciary, pretty much like the Democrats when they had the Supreme Court, our judiciary enforced draconian totalitarian ideals and bypassed our constitution with amendments and amendments and amendments. Hence we got indoctrination, hence we got abortion. That's where we are now, featuring cultural Marxism. So if Sinn Féin get into power, They're very, economically, they're not strong. They promised to build 100,000 houses when we know through CSO Central Statistics Office figures, we're only capable of building 10,500 units at full capacity, at full employment. But they've promised 100,000 houses to solve the social pressure. They will not touch on immigration because Soros, and they are allies of Soros. They're members of being labelled on the Soros website as ally. Lynn Boylan is the name. That's public information, so I'm not letting anything out of the bag there. As an ally of Soros. So whatever Soros wants, Soros gets. Abortion, open borders, free movement of labour, and suppression of the media.
So it sounds awfully familiar, and it's got to feel hopeless at times. We're going to get into some ideas that we used here and maybe how you could implement those there momentarily. What often happens here with we call them rhinos, Republicans in name only. They call themselves conservatives. They call themselves Republicans, and they were part of a uniparty that is, really consolidated control in D.C. and is only, their only goal is and was and continues to be staying in power and keeping us subjugated to their every last whim. So they would use an individual policy such as balancing the budget or getting the budget under control. And some of them would come in and say, see, look, we balanced the budget. Meanwhile, over here, the other hand was doing all kinds of stuff that was the opposite of helping America, such as destroying the immigration system, allowing corporations to become monopolies and control over everything, not enforcing the rule of law, not enforcing the constitutional rule of law when it comes to all of that stuff. I did a little bit of research on Sinn Féin. And one of the things that they want to do, and to see if this correlates, right? A bigger picture thing that may benefit individual Irishmen and women in the areas of uniting Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland back in together again is one of their stances that they would like to do. Meanwhile, they're not trying to get control of the actual problem that is the immigration and the unfettered control of people into the nation. So in one hand, you're trying to use a populist message almost of that might, from afar anyway, tell me if I'm wrong, that might be a good idea for the majority of Ireland to unite the two areas back into one again. And it maybe is it more about a backhanded or a second-handed move over here that would be more about controlling Northern Ireland?
There's a lot to unpack there. I want to touch on a live chat quickly. Christine Shear asked me what are my thoughts on HRC serving as the Chancellor of Queen's University. That, as I believe, is just a guise so she can travel around the world globe and give an excuse to go to certain locations that she is representing the Queen's University. That's just a paid for bus ticket, shall we say. That's what I think of that in those terms. To answer your question, to take different parts of your question there, just give me a brief summation again. Sorry.
Well, tell me this: the idea that Sinn Féin wants to unite Northern Ireland and Ireland.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on that?
Well, Sinn Féin, from as representative of the political wing of the IRA, which was the Irish Republican Army. At the start, when you're seeing the great troubles that were going on, we had the great heroes of that time, of that struggle. Bobby Sands, the blanket man. Bobby Sands died for an ideal, and a cause at that time was to have Ireland ruled by Ireland free of the rule of British law in the 6 counties. It was the united Ireland of the 32 counties. That was the goal. That was the espousal. After the blanket men saga and that time of history went on, somewhere along that process in the 80s, they went from revolutionaries to the cultural Marxist kind of chain. And I think the two trajectories were locked in tangent because, as all good long-term plans take, they knew that by the time the universities and academia and the enforcement of and the one-sided teaching of towards socialism, and to take the trade workers union type socialism that it was here in Ireland and to transpose it over stealthily, tactfully into the Frankfurt School took a period of time, took 15 or 20 years. Come the end of that, when there's a batch of university eligible people or people that gain into power, that gain in access into power. Don't forget, Leo Varadkar served under Obama in '96 during his internship and did 3 years under Obama's when he was governor of Chicago. So that is the Irish connection there. That's the Clinton. So I frame Leo Varadkar very much as a 44. And I know that you understand that terminology. That's where I'm going with that. I can't prove that outright, but the similarities and the positions and how he was able to gain access and to get an unelected mandate when our elected mandate leader at the time, Enda Kenny, sidestepped the will of the people and then placed in 44 for the rest of that term. And you've seen what's happened in 2 years of that leadership. We've signed up to PESCO, which effectively gave Europe effective control of our defence forces. And I say defence forces because during my travels and my understanding, most people here would still have been under the assumption, and I say a good strong cohort of people would have been used to the idea that Ireland was a neutral country and therefore we weren't to get involved, but we had this big bore, this obvious thorn in the side, which was Shannon Airport, which is a staging point for long-haul flights for the military, for the American military. So they would land in Shannon, they would expatriate ISIS warriors or whatever thing like that. So rendition flights would be run through. And generally enough, with people's perception that they were a neutral country, they didn't see why they were allowing this to happen in their country. But if we raise up from our elevation and our understanding, the governments were complicit. This was part of the arrangements through the gathering of time, through the Clinton involvement, through the rollout of the 16-year plan, as it became to know, that was needed. And it was a military strategic staging point. They didn't have to land in the United Kingdom because the United Kingdom was, through multiculturalism, through the mass movement of people, was becoming shady ground. You know, you couldn't trust. There was rocket launches in Heathrow back in the 80s, if you remember them. Libyan terrorists were firing rockets at Heathrow because it's in the middle of a city centre. Shannon's out in the sticks. You've got a long way to travel. There's a range before you can see the tarmac. I was down there when the president flew into Mar-a-Lago. I did a report on it on the channel, and I got reasonably close to the two sons. But at that stage, there was Antifa were stationed out over there, and whatever operatives were stationed there. So there was no clear point for me to gain access. At that time, I was still a very new concept as a YouTuber, as a citizen journalist, you know, and people are coming around to that concept over here. You know, they digest my information. The criticism is it's not journalistic. I'm not a journalist. I'm a citizen journalist. I'm transmitting information. Blah, blah, blah. I know I might be spinning off in different directions.
No, you're good. What do you think?
There's a lot to get through, and I don't want to hog the mic on you.
No, you're fine. Is it a good thing to that? Is there a consensus that uniting Ireland again is the right path forward?
Yeah, that's where you're bringing me back to my point there. Well done, you. Congratulations for bringing us back here. So Sinn Féin espoused the idea that they want a 32 county republic. And that's now, and from when you take it from their position where they have antithetical, anti-Irish policies, which is open borders, how can they want and aspire to have 32 counties, but under the rule of Brussels? They are EU compliant. They've said in their manifesto, which is startling and striking, since 1998, Sinn Féin in their Cumans, in their, you know, when they assemble as a political party, I can't remember the American equivalent, not the super PACs, but the conservative CPACs. And they espoused the ideology that they would, in 98, that they were open borders. They were for open borders and all of that kind of jazz. That passed the realm in 98. People weren't thinking, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, open borders, help asylum seekers. Sinn Féin are very much involved in the Palestinian struggle, in the Syrian struggle. We've had visits from Hamas here. We have the biggest mosque in Europe called Clonski Mosque, which is the European headquarters of the Muslim Brotherhood. Very well known. Abraham Hawali and all the Halawis are here. There's that integration. That's never spoken about. But they're not designated a terrorist organization over here. Neither is Hamas. They're treated like royalty over here. Because the revolutionaries see their struggle and understand that level of socialism, but don't understand that the cultural Marxist socialism has usurped and taken over that idea. And it's cultural Marxism now that's driving your birth rate rate. And the anti-Irish policy is by bringing abortion into Ireland, it's majority Irish people that will facilitating of that and not only paying for it through their tax and because very few immigrants are or you foreign nationals that arrive here, they don't believe they don't believe in abortion as such. But if the state's paying them to have 5 or 6 kids, no problem, where the average taxpayer here is having 1.1, then the game is rigged against the indigenous person, because they are required 2 units to go out and work and earn tax and pay for their childcare cost, which the state runs. The childcare, it facilitates it, it funds it. But the indoctrination of Marxism is very much in those daycare centres now, as they are in the council state paid for hangouts for teenagers in county council leisure centres. You'll have a very LGBT oriented place where the kids can come in and hang out in. But the leaders of those things are pushing the socialist, cultural Marxist agenda. You can do what they will. LGBT, we're all equal. All cultures are equal. The far right is here now. The racists are there. The boogeymen are here. And it's like, no, GM. I don't give a shit if you're a Muslim or Islam, and I understand the fundamentalist part of it. I can go through that conversation, but I'm against the torture and barbarity displayed by that particular section of our Irish society that ship their fucking children over to Somalia and genitally mutilate them and then bring them back here. And our solution is just to create 2 brand new state-of-the-art FGM clinics. It's a nonsense. There's no recovery from that. But none of the parents were prosecuted. And I put that very much in line with my ideology now that I would love to see, which I will facilitate and push and agitate for, is Rudy Giuliani's broken windows policy. We start with the smallest crimes. We're not protecting our children because we're allowing the smallest cultural difference to take precedence over the life and constitutional protection of children. But we had a children's referendum and we gave the state more power than the parent. So the state dictates. And if the state is corrupted, if there's bad actors like Catherine Zupponi, who was the Minister for Children over here. Catherine Zupponi was married to a Canadian school teacher. That Canadian school teacher, she pushed out the sort of sexual education in the early days, the Kinski-eyed thing of, pedophilia, of child sex normalizing, all of that BS. She was locked into that. She's been responsible for so many, I can talk about her now because she's not in government anymore. She was given the Eve Ho. She's a dual passport holder. How was that allowed into our government system? But she pushes that Trotsky-like nonsense, and she gagged so many parents that could not speak about the child abuse that their children were experiencing, not only in state care, but sometimes by their partners. Sometimes their partners were connected to very serious parts of the Child Protection Agency or part of government controls. We only have to look to the Epstein did not kill himself scenario to see where I'm leading with that. You understand? Yeah. So that just gets me going. I'm probably going to be emotional, but I'm trying to be cautious with my words. But
no, I really appreciate it. This kind of stuff, we're all in personal fights. We're all in, different fights that we can be influencers in, and we don't always have the time to really understand what's truly happening. So this is so important. And there's a lot of people in chat that are going, "Oh, destroying the family. Boy, does that sound familiar." Boy, does that sound familiar. It's the same tactic that they have used in England, that they have used in Germany, that they have used here in America, that they're using there in Ireland. There is hope, and let's transition into. I think we're clear that Sinn Féin doesn't necessarily have the best interest of each individual Ireland person in mind. How you treat the innocent, as they say, is an example of a successful society. And if we can't protect the innocent, then we are failing as a society. There is hope. The Irish Freedom Party. There is another party. Can you talk about the Now, I understand that they didn't have the greatest election this time, but that's okay. It's the idea that the beginning of it that let me rewind a little bit. 2008.
I rewind or you rewind?
Barack Obama becomes 2007, 2008 timeframe. We're all, us conservative activists are uniting. we create what was called the Freedom Works. It started with about 300 to 500 of us, quickly grew to about 13 to 20,000 of people that had a list, a mailing list of people where we could become activists in one. We could share ideas and say, we could vote on stuff. We could say, what do you guys think about this, about that, about this? And then we could move forward together as one. That quickly grew into 2010 of us taking over the House and creating the Freedom Caucus in the House. And then 2012, in between that time frame when they realized the threat that was the Freedom Caucus, they basically turned us into racist, homophobes, just the same old garbage that they do over and over again. Far-right conspiracy theorists. They labeled us in the public wasn't awake at this time to understand how that affects people, and it's basically manipulation of population. So then we lost some ground there. But then in 2015, President Trump went to a Freedom Caucus Tea Party event and heard speakers that are more well spoken than I talk about the ideals of true conservatism and how we protect the most innocent of our society. And President Trump took those ideas and expanded them into the federal government, starting with data, starting with small ground activists, grassroots activists like me, who times 1,000,000 became the strongest 63 million that got him elected. So you have that foundation, that 2008 foundation of the Irish Freedom Party over there happening right now, and others. Can you talk about the beginnings of that type of movement in Ireland and others that are like it? And what's your thoughts in general on these type of parties?
Well, let me just say, I think the Irish Freedom Party started in 2018, and this is its first election contestant. And we are about that size. According to the polls, we represent about 1% of the value of the vote, which is nothing, is a blip. And many patriots and nationalists were taking, step down and would see that as as not a great election result. We have the National Party. Yeah, if you're following my channel, I've interviewed leaders of both of those parties. I was there from the inception from the Irish Freedom Party. I wasn't involved in it, but I covered it. I promoted it as an idea, as a concept. I was aware that there was another institution or another political party called the National Party, but I had no contacts with them. So I promoted this concept of Irish Freedom Party, which was based on the idea of leaving, as it was first primarily called, Ire Exit, which was the concept of following Britain out of Europe. Having, that was a year and a half ago, but there is no appetite for that because the majority of people here still think that the European Union is a very good thing for Ireland and that they gave us the roads, and don't want to go off too far on a tangent there, but those roads have literally destroyed Ireland and perforated the accessibility of our second plantation 2.0 and economically fucking destroyed it. I'll stop coursing, sorry. I get carried away now. So the new parties are there. One party has been in more or less existence, I think, for 3 years, which is the National Party. And this was, again, its first showing out. And, trajectories and strategies, as much as one can try and project what you anticipate, reality often gives you a kick in the jaw. So for me, I set the bar low. My expectation was, and it was met with that 1%, because the way I reflect on it, 2 years ago, or maybe I think it was 2016, 2017, we had Pegida come over here and nationalists were effectively chased off the streets. They were labeled as anti-immigrant or anti-Islamophobic or anti-Islamists of Europe at the time. There was no appetite for that here in Ireland. There was no appetite there in Europe. So that, when the Antifa brought over their UK counterparts as foot soldiers and the streets were flooded with many numerous people, when that event was called, they were vastly outnumbered. And the original people there, and the original people that started and invited that over here were Identity Ireland. They were the first sort of tenuous sprouts of this type of nationalism, of conservative, right-wing, family-orientated conservatism, in its early inception. That's when it took out. So 2 years later, this party, the National Party, is brought up. There's another party now called Renua, and they're an offshoot of one of the established parties, Fine Gael. One of their TDs separated from the party and created our own identity and called it Renua. But it is as what Antua, which is another party here in Ireland is Sinn Féin light. Renew it was seen as Fine Gael light. They different on one position, but essentially we're the same on either side. And that's playing out here in Ireland as well. So let me think. Again, I veer off in tangents.
Well, no, you're
I'm
fine.
trying to bring you all together as all the moving parts move. I'm trying to bring it all together to get to that initial point that you were saying. But yeah, but when you started off there, the early inception of nationalism probably started from then. Now we've 2 years later, we've got candidates running. That to me was the bar. That to me was the bar met. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we couldn't take to the streets. Now we've got candidates running of various different types of colour, of very different people, all very capable, all very honest, but all committing to represent Irish interest and put the Irish first, which is seen as such a shocking statement to make over here, because the general consensus between the woke culture, which is in the majority of control of Twitter, Facebook, Google, so the censorship is rife here. The funneling of funds to these organizations that maintain that ethos, that attack me, a true noxious, toxic substance into my eyes, that that's being proceeded, that's going through police. The police are going to prosecute that person. But that took 6 months to get it through. That person is connected to an ex-justice minister. She's the daughter of a very corrupt justice minister, Sean Doherty. Go check him out during the realm of Sean Haughey. So I think there was a huge, well, she's after attacking this person on a live stream. It's there for all to see. She also tweeted about the contents, Coca-Cola, curry powder, spit, vomit, whatever else they could throw in there. And that is a toxic substance. That's assault. So they've had to prosecute her. How that plays out, we'll know in May. But then she's very closely linked to the current Justice Minister, or as he was before the elections, Charlie Flanagan. She's often seen and photographed talking to him, whatever they may be, but she's familiar to him. You understand? She's the one that attacked me on the street. She represents a branch of Antifa. She speaks about smashing the fascists. She takes the hate not hope line, or the NGO line that all cultures are equal. But she's an enforcer. Now we've got Hate Not Hope painting me in their UK article as one of the main agitators by another, the communication officer for ENOR over here, who paints targets for Antifa Ireland. Antifa Ireland then dox, harass, as they've done to me, intimidate. But no intimidation, because I was a shocking new thing to me. I was a person that was going to stick a camera in their face. I wasn't going to meet them with violence, but I wasn't going to back down from calling them out on their, challenging them on their positions, or pointing out the flaws in their arguments, like sticking 100 people in the middle of a village that only had a capacity, or one shop, one pub, and a population of 300. That was too much of a demographic change in one small area, and I was calling it out. There was no facilities for them. They weren't catered for by medicine. Blah, blah, blah. You go on. But they wanted to push that because it's human trafficking, because it's George Soros, because the state pays out £100 a head to the hotel owner, 2 million a year. Happy days. They're popping up all around Ireland. It's the second plantation. But people aren't aware of it because these are asylum seekers, these are refugees. But hang on, we just signed the Migration Pact, and all people are equal, and all migrants, economic asylum seekers, they're all classed as one migrant class. You can't differentiate from them. You can't deviate from that. And when the hate speech laws are pushed out, which Sinn Féin will want to enforce, that's part of their doctrine. They want to bring in the hate speech laws for wrongthink. That's anti-Irish. Our constitution says we have the right to freedom of expression. In an old English type of legislation, it's vague, it's vague, but it worked. It's always worked. Like the inalienable rights given to children and the protection of the right of life was subverted by amendments through the courts to what we have now is 27-week abortions with no fucking anesthetic to the fetus, and we're heading towards Virginia. But our population doesn't see that because we're virtuous. And I like my Facebook posts and I do my Instagram posts, and I'm okay, Jack. But my job is being undercut. I can't afford my mortgage. I'm 20 years of age, but I'll never get a mortgage because things keep going up through the roof. And I'm saying immigration, we want controlled immigration. We want to regulate the movement of people so that our services can be balanced and paid, that our health services aren't corrupted or overburdened, and people are dying on trolleys that have lived all their life in this country and are dying horrible deaths in trolleys. But it's reported on, but it's not discussed in the media. We're not allowed to talk about the elephant in the room. According to the polls here in Ireland, the number one concern was social housing and healthcare. But nobody talks about the elephant in the room, that the mass movement of people coming in and putting this extra burden on all our institutions and all our facilities are a finite resource. And if the minority is given preferential treatment, or is given the victim status, and is given equality to the majority of the population, and therefore benefit them, you can't criticize it. They're getting free houses over people that have been on a waiting list for 20 years. But some people have come into the country already a year, but have been superseded and are now subverting the rule, or taking over the rule. So populations are printing up because the welfare state is wide open. The asylum system is open to corruption. And not only in the free movement, when you sign up to the Migration Pact, part of that Migration Pact, it mentions, as Renald Camus, and I discussed that with Thierry, it's called the replacement, it's called my replacement migration. But we are shot down for bringing that up. We are you can't call it that. But that's what it is. You're cutting our birth rates. You're importing a worker class. 2008, when the first financial crash came here to Ireland, 400,000 of our youth, of our employment, had to leave. And as Joe Morris said, they did our country a great service by doing that. It took pressure off services. It took time for the economy to come down because it wasn't overburdened with a welfare class that there were no jobs available. So they went elsewhere to get them jobs, but always with the majority intention of coming back home because with their extended life. But the government now, and the anti-Irish policies that Sinn Féin will now want to reinforce, have made it near impossible for Irish people to return home, because their class now is migrants, Irish migrants, so they have to renew their passports. They have to do their birth certs. They have to resit driving exams. When this is their home, they should have a natural right to just come back here, take precedence on the social housing, be given preferential treatment to come back home. But it's impossible for all our workers in Australia, all our qualified nurses to come back home to make it a decent living. But it's impossible even for them to do the simple thing of coming back to vote. So now we've had these replacement of our 400,000 strong youth capable workforce, and now we brought in a welfare dependent class through migration, through that. Now they're getting first class medical healthcare treatment. They're getting medical cards that the taxpayer pays for. 60%, I would say, of our population is dependent on the state. That's not a good place to be. 60 to 65% in some shape or form. Even our millionaire class, even our billionaire class, they still take their child allotment of state child benefit, 118 or 120 a week. Most of the majority of well-to-do people still collect that because they're ingrained. Well, it's mine. It's there. But it's not left in storage to rebuild the pension fund, which the Troika took office in 2018, 20 billion of a pension fund that was saved through stuff. And we had to give that to the Troika to pay back the banking debt that we never agreed to in the first place, that was taken on. We lumbered ourselves, we were lumbered with 65 billion. That was a quarter of the European bank debt that the Irish people are now covering and paying 8.5 billion on interest only. There's money taken away from resources in the hospital, in schools, in education. We had another shocking Banana Republic event happen here. The FAI, the Football Association of Ireland, was mismanaged and misrun by their head of, or their chief executive, who was paying himself 400,000 a year and bankrupted the FAI. The government then just bailed him out, gave them 20 million to keep operating, to keep the entity going. Meanwhile, there's 10,000 people sleeping rough on the streets. That 20 billion could have done renovating a certain amount of properties that would have taken all of the homeless, 8,500 off the streets in a matter of months. But people are dying on our streets over here because there's no leadership. Now we've got Sinn Féin, and if Sinn Féin get in, they were sectarian. They were the political wing of a sectarian organisation, as it morphed into. I didn't want to go down this sort of path when I get emotional, but I'm seeing statistics and the way our Irish people view the Sinn Féin as, because they got the protest vote. The cultural revolution, or the political revolution, was the smashing of the duopoly, the rhinos and the Democrats as they are over here. And this third perspective, which is exactly the same cheek of the arse. The three of them are described as Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil and Sinn Féin are two cheeks of an arse that I have to listen to an arsehole, because the arsehole is in the room now and it spouts a lot of nonsense and it describes itself as a nationalist organisation. But all its policies are anti-Irish. More and more Republican sinners have left that organisation. So it's kind of split and fractured. But those that remain in power are serious operators, have access and operate in a black market economy. Have done so, which was demonstrated by the petrol washing or the diesel washing back in the 80s when fuel and diesel was comparatively the same price. So it was brought in from the United States are shipped in and washed and given into cars at half the price. So they made millions out of that. Now they're going to bring the Greens in. They want to stick 26 cent onto a litre of diesel for the carbon tax, for the climate tax. You know what I mean? More and more taxation. Those funds will never be accounted for. We don't know, like our fiscally, how many people as citizens are keeping an eye on our national debt, as per se, our economy, where monies get distributed. But one thing's for sure, the NGO class here, which is the state talking to the state, which is the creator of the Hegelian dialect, problem, solution, reaction. They create the problem. They're trying to create the far-right agitator, the Nazis, the fascists, the homophobes, the Islamophobes. But to go back to your earlier point, we're at the early inception of the deplorables. Ireland will and is a small place. Things are happening at a faster pace. 15 years, we've already overtaken the United Kingdom for foreign national population that resides here. We're nearly a quarter foreign nationals of different cultures and ethnicities, but all concentrated in Dublin, competing for the same amount of jobs, space and services. The sewerage system now is designed for 1.3. It's overflowing and flooding, which suggests there's over 2 million people here. But the Irish statistics say, we've got 50,000 Chinese nationals that live and operate in Dublin. But the Chinese embassy has reports of 80,000. So who is it? You know what I mean? Who's telling the truth? Who's recording the true, accurate facts? So the unwillingness to discuss the elephant in the room, which is immigration, which is putting a burden on us, control the flow. We've had Georgians and Albanians coming off the airport, which are part of Europe, pulling their passports apart and claiming asylum, international protection. They're then brought into the asylum process. They're given by UN mandate, 3 times to appeal. 80%, 90% of asylum seeker claims are rejected, but we don't deport. They're told to self-deport. They're given 3 appeals at 80,000 per appeal, which the taxpayer pays for. So our solicitors are legal, are sucking off the tit and surviving that way off the taxpayer. Yep. The taxpayer is getting stronger and stronger again, and that's the normal Joe Soap who competes in the. Sorry, Abe, I'm going to hog this. I got to get this off my chest. The builders, the people that I operate, the market that I worked in, is now getting crippled by cheap, free labour. More and more entities are under pressure. Men are seeing their wages driven down. They can't meet their mortgage demands. Their interest rates haven't even started to go up yet. And when they do, the vulture funds that are here buying up block houses, block apartments, and renting them back to the Irish people. We're going back to the land wars, landlord class against tenant class. We've got Brazilian nationals, Romanian nationals sharing 7, 8, 10, 14 to a room and operating and depriving jobs that those 400,000 should have been doing at an economically, at a rate that they could exist on. But the demands and pressure, the more movement of people that come in, the higher that rents go up. Sinn Féin are talking about putting a freeze on rents. That's bullshit. It never works out. They'll just lock in at a stupid high rate and people will still be caught in the same trap for 2 years. Yep. And that's not going to solve nothing. How are they going to pay for the 100,000 houses that we can't take 10,000 people off the street homeless, but they're going to build 100,000 houses to facilitate the Fine Gael Ireland Agenda 2040 plan, which is to bring a million new more people into the country. We're all well aware of that. It's nonsense. It's Soros. It's globalism. It's corporatism. But the revolutionaries, the youth have forgotten about the past of what the IRA or what the Sinn Féin movement was, a reactionary revolutionary force to the ousting of a foreign entity in what was perceived in its ideological terms, it's United Ireland. That's all being destroyed.
It's quite the stark picture, my friend. And I gotta ask you to see if you'll serenade us on your way out here. We only have a few minutes left, so I kind of missed your.
Sorry, I went off on one there. Sorry.
Say that again.
I apologize. I went off on there.
No. You're fine. It's you painted the picture that needs to be painted, and hopefully there are those that are paying attention that can that will take this information and run with it. Before I ask you to serenade us out on your way out today, first of all, thanks for spending time with us. Thanks for letting us understand, what's happening. We see exactly the same things that they have tried to do here. The globalist policies that are trying to enslave people and basically indebt them to the government. And then you collapse the state, the same policies that happened in Greece, where you create a people that are dependent on the government. You then you destroy their ability to maintain a decent budget so that they collapse, and then the EU or some other national organization comes in and tries to save them. This is the same playbook that is being played out all across the world by nefarious, big bankers and those that think they control the world, man. And so all we can do is say we're on the right path to solving these problems worldwide, but man, it's not going to happen with a snap of a finger. You feel me?
Yeah, 5x5, brother, all the time. Yeah, we all recognize it. Look, we had an early introduction to all the strategies from the Q phenomenon, from joining nationalists from the United States, nationalists from Eastern Europe, nationalists from the United Kingdom, nationalists in Australia, nationalists, which are common sense folk, which want the equality and the rule of law to be equal amongst all people that are in their populations, but have the right to protect and preserve their own cultures and their own way of life, not to be subverted by government becoming the problem rather than not never the solution, but a function of the citizenry of the people. That's all it ever should be. Not, we don't do it. I'll tell you what I'll do. I want to thank Live Chat. I want to thank you for this opportunity to come onto your show. I'd ask you and encourage you to share this amongst your Irish diaspora in the United States. Do not fund Sinn Féin. Look towards National Party, Irish Freedom Party, patriots like myself, like other Irish YouTubers that are over here. Dave Cullen, you've got Gerard Murphy, you've got Keith Woods, is a very philosophical sort of person. You've got the Don. You have got, I don't really want to leave anybody else. The Big Taboo, you'll see selections of news articles that will be formatted in an Irish context through Patriotic Eye, or social media articles that you wouldn't normally get from mainstream. You'll get from Big Taboo. Also, he is the second runner, the originator of that concept was Orlared, Orlared. His channel was removed. You can now only operate out of BitChute. I'd encourage you to show him the love if you're on BitChute and get over there and give him some viewing figures, because the man did us all a great service, but he lost his channel and possibly his way of life. So you must always be reminded of that and remembered. Anything else like that, follow my channel. You'll see the people that I am in contact with, the nationalists. And this is only the beginning for us. This is the beginning of the deplorables. We've started. We've registered the ping. One ping only, Mr. Chekhov. That ripple travels all the way to the edge of the lake. Whatever length of time it takes to get there, the pill is being dropped. The red pilling has begun. More and more people are wearing this type of information, this truth and level of conversation.
You're here. Do you think maybe we can do this on a regular basis to give us updates of what's doing over there? Maybe once a month, once every few weeks.
I can't commit to a regular schedule. I'm very much involved in the background. I'm very much the reason I left Patriot Soapbox was to come on and communicate back here. And I'm very much aware that when I'm on my show, I'm speaking to my people back here, the Dubs, Northside Dubs, people that understand my Dublin accent. I'm aware that when I'm here in company with my American patriots and my American friends, that I do slow down and articulate, but I'm understood by my people, and it's my people that I'm trying to get. And to me, I'm just a Northsider, a stupid gammon Northsider that doesn't know what he's talking about. But I bring the truth, and that's a very effective and powerful thing. And
yeah, no doubt about it. We're right up against the top of the hour here. I don't want to take too much of their time. Will you give us a quick song on your way out?
Yeah, one song, and it won't be an Irish song. It's just an old favourite of mine that I think my voice can take up, and I am.
Right. Much love, Grant Torino. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks, Abe. But we'll check in again. But I will not make it a regular thing, but I will come back and we can be in contact. Look how tired I am. Oh, my God. Ready? 412, good for you. I can hear the soft breathing of the girl that I love as she lies here beside me, asleep with the night. And her hair in a fine mist floats on my pillow, reflecting the glow of a winter moonlight. She is soft, she is warm, but my heart remains heavy, and I watch as her breast gently rise, gently fall. For I know at the first light of dawn I'll be leaving, and tonight will be all I have left to recall. Oh, what have I done? Why have I done it? I've committed a crime, broken the law. for $25 and pieces of silver. I held up and robbed a hard liquor store. I'll leave it there. It was in mixed favor.
Yay. Much love. Gran Torino in the house, everyone out there. Show him some love. Give him a follow on Twitter if you can.